In today's video, I'm going to be transforming this little cabinet that I got from Facebook Marketplace. Now, it's fairly dark. There's a lot going on here. We've got veneer on some spots. The back panel here is exposed hardboard, and the bottom here is laminate. There's some solid wood trim, the legs are solid wood, and everything else, like I said, is veneer. A lot of the pieces I do are fairly dark, so for this one, I want to go in the opposite direction. We're going to be transforming this into something light. Stay tuned! My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. One thing that I get asked fairly often is why I do a lot of my pieces dark. And to be honest, I love the look of dark wood. I love walnut, and even though this isn't walnut, this is actually African mahogany veneer with an elm base and elm trim. It's finished so dark that it's almost meant to mimic walnut. While that's fine, for this piece I want to do something a little bit different, so I'm actually going to be lightening this piece up. I'm removing the screws from this middle piece because it is the only way to access the doors. And by sliding this out, I'm able to get something in here to pry down the little metal pieces that I will show you that hold the doors in place. Some doors, all you have to do is lift them up and they pop out, not these ones, and I'll show you why. These metal clips are on the top, and then the bottom has these plastic guides, and these are a bugger to break, so be really careful when you're taking the doors off, because if you break these bottom ones, it's difficult to find replacements. So now that those are out, I'm going to pop this back in. And you can see here too, the other reason I'm removing the doors, this section was actually permanently in behind this middle panel, so the only way to refinish it was to take it out. So like I said, this is African mahogany veneer, but there's also laminate here on the bottom. And the interior of this is dark, so because I want to do light on the outside, I have to consider the fact that there's going to be a lot of contrast with the inside. I can't really refinish this laminate panel. I could cover it, put something over it, or paint it, but I don't really want to do either of those things. So what I'm thinking of doing is having a nice contrast with the light wash on the outside and a dark interior. But first I need to get all of this dark finish off. So these doors have solid wood trim, veneer on the front face, sandwiching, a pressed wood substrate, and veneer on the back side. To someone new to this, these may have initially looked like solid wood doors because there's the same wood on the front and the back, but that is not the case. So if you're ever in doubt, I always encourage you to look at the undersides of things because usually that's where you can see the layers. The finishes on these pieces are usually super thick, so sometimes they take more than one layer of stripper. The stripper that I use is circa 1850, and normally that will cut through anything, but there's some sort of special coating they put on some of these pieces that obviously protect them over time, but they're a bit of a bugger to get off. This isn't a typical lacquer finish on this. So something that's pretty common with these pieces is to have grain filler in the wood pores. And this can look like stain, but it's actually a filler and it can be a little bit hard to get out. Luckily on these solid wood trim pieces and legs, I can literally just sand it off. But on the veneer, of course, you want to be a little bit more gentle. Now, when it comes to where this flat section meets the trim, what you don't want to do is tip your sander in to try to get that. Just keep your sander flat, butt up against it, and then you can come in and hand sand that little area that the sander doesn't reach. Hopefully that will save you from sanding through the veneer in those sections. So I mentioned the back was the exact same veneer as the front, but you can see it's pretty messy. It's not even finished. There's fingerprints, and I'm just giving us a light sanding just to clean it up. And after that, I will do my final sanding of 180 on the rest. So the top here is mahogany veneer. This is not, this is the same wood as the legs. This section here is mahogany veneer faced, and then the pressed wood in between. The interior is also mahogany veneer except for the shelf, and I really hate this back panel, so I'm actually going to be removing it. I don't like the fact that it's just hardboard that is exposed. Even though this is basically a department store quality piece, it doesn't have to look cheap. So I'll be adding some repositionable wallpaper on the inside of this back panel. And as far as the shelf goes, I'm just going to clean it really good with a degreasing cleaner, and I'm going to add a layer of water-based stain on top and seal it, and it's just going to make it look darker and kind of hide any imperfections. So because I'm going to be doing a paint wash on this, I want to raise the grain, and this is also going to show you what this would look like with just a clear coat. It's a little misleading because when it's sanded it looks light, and a lot of people assume that if they put a clear coat on it's going to stay that color, but this wood is normally quite reddish, so when you put anything on it that's clear, that's the color you're going to get. The reason I'm raising the grain first and then lightly hand sanding is because when I put my paint wash on, the water in the paint wash is going to raise the grain, and that's when it lifts up and it feels very rough and splintery. But if you do that ahead of time and just very lightly hand sand, when you put your paint wash on, it won't raise anymore. I like Algonquin for reddish woods because it has just the slightest green tint to it, and I find it does a really good job of neutralizing the red in some of these woods like mahogany and cherry. I have this mixed at slightly more than half paint, half water in favor of water. And it's going to look pretty opaque initially, but you have to move quickly and wipe off all of the excess before it dries. This is going to allow me to continue to see the wood grain, but it's not going to be so dark and not so red. This isn't going to appeal to everyone, I totally understand that. A lot of people, for some reason, hate neutral colors, but they are still the best sellers. I let the paint wash dry for several hours and I'm adding some Odie's oil. And I did a test a while back where I put Odie's oil over a paint wash just to see if it would yellow it over time. And it actually doesn't. As always with Odie's, once you apply it and let it sit for a while, then you go back in and you remove all of the excess oil, all of it. And you're left with this beautiful, buttery, soft finish. It smells great, and it's just a lovely, soft luster. So I always check the grain on legs like this because often you'll have one leg that has two different types of grain. So I'm trying to find a good match here. These are going to be my front legs. They are the two that are the closest in pattern and they'll look nice in the front. Now I have to figure out if I want to do these light or dark. And initially I wanted to do a whitewash on the bottom, but I think it's just going to look too cool in temperature compared to what I've done on the top section of the cabinet. And also I have that dark interior with the laminate that I can't really do anything about. So I'm doing a test. I'm doing one leg with a white stain and one with this walnut colored stain. And immediately as soon as I put the dark stain on, I knew that this is what I wanted to go with for the legs and the leg assembly. I mean, these are both lovely, and the white one is really nice. I don't think this is the piece for it. I think the brown, it's going to look a lot better and more cohesive and kind of tie in that interior with the exterior. If this is your first time here on the channel and you like this sort of content, please consider subscribing. It helps me out a lot, and make sure to click that notification bell if you want to be notified every time I put out a video. I'm a bit of a mixed bag when it comes to furniture here. I do some restorations, I do some repurposing. Sometimes I paint, sometimes I don't. It really just depends on the piece. Now you'll notice as I'm putting the paint on here that it's different than if I'm painting a solid coat. With the paint wash, you need to move super fast, so I am putting it on in any direction, making sure that it covers well, and then immediately wiping it off. So I've given the inside of the back panel here a light sanding just to make sure there's no sharp edges from the staples where they had been. And if you've been on my channel before, you might recognize this paper. This was a very divisive decision I made on a piece a while back, and people either loved this paper or they hated it. And while I don't think it necessarily goes the best with the outside, this is going to be the inside where it's dark brown, and it's just going to add a little pop of color. Tan washes, especially on a piece as plain as the one I'm doing, like with not a lot of fancy trim or ornate details, sometimes you just need a little pop of color, and I find that this has a little bit of a retro feel to it. But what's nice is that if the new owners decide they don't like this, all they have to do is pop the back panel off just like I did, and they can peel this off and put it on whatever whatever they want. I don't really care that the bottom is laminate, but I hate that you can see the edge of the hardboard that the laminate is on. So I'm just using some stain here to sort of paint the nastiness away. So looking back at what I started with, I could have gone in a totally different direction and redone this dark and beautiful and fresh, but I wanted to try something a little bit different and also show you how you can tone down mahogany if you don't like redwood. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.